Rain hammered the sidewalks of downtown Los Angeles as Ayla Bennett clutched her thin jacket, rushing toward the bus stop. Her diner wages barely covered groceries, but she refused to complain. Behind her, a man in a soaked hoodie stepped onto the bus, reached into his pockets, then froze, empty. "No fare, no ride," the driver said coldly. The stranger turned to leave, but something in his quiet exhaustion struck her. "Here," Ayla said softly, tapping her card again. The man stiffened, staring at her with disbelief. "You don't have to—" "I know," she shrugged. "Just get home safe." He sat far behind her, watching her reflection as if she were something he couldn't understand. Because he wasn't just a stranger. He was Ji-woon Kang, one of LA's most feared Korean mafia bosses, hiding after escaping a failed ambush. No one had ever helped him without expecting something in return. Until her. Welcome to Korean Mafia Lovers. Hey there, please let us know where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. Your support is essential for us to continue bringing you these stories. The fluorescent lights of Mel's diner cast harsh shadows across Ayla Bennett's exhausted face as she wiped down the last table of her double shift. Her feet ached in her worn sneakers, and her lower back protested every movement. But she forced a smile for the late-night customers still nursing their coffee. "Table 6 needs their check," called Sandra, the night manager, her voice sharp with impatience. Ayla nodded, smoothing her apron and approaching the booth where 2 construction workers sat. Their conversation died as she approached, their eyes following her movements with the kind of attention that made her skin crawl. "Can I get you gentlemen anything else?" she asked politely, setting the check on the table. One of them, a burly man with grease-stained fingers, let his gaze linger on her curves. "How about your number, sweetheart?" Ayla's smile never wavered, though her stomach tightened. "I'm afraid that's not on the menu. Have a good evening." She turned to leave, but the man's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. "Come on, don't be like that. A pretty girl like you shouldn't be working in a dump like this." "Let go of me," Ayla said firmly, her voice steady despite the fear creeping up her spine. The man's grip tightened. "I'm just being friendly. She asked you to let go." The voice was low, controlled, and carried an edge that made everyone in the diner turn. A man stood near the entrance, water dripping from his dark hair onto the checkered floor. His hoodie was soaked through, clinging to a muscular frame, and his jeans were torn at the knee. But it was his eyes that made the construction worker immediately release Ayla's wrist, dark, intense, and completely unforgiving. "We don't want any trouble," the second construction worker mumbled, already reaching for his wallet. The stranger said nothing, just stood there with the stillness of a predator waiting to strike. The 2 men threw money on the table and hurried out, not looking back. Ayla rubbed her wrist, studying the man who had intervened. There was something about him that didn't fit, the way he carried himself despite his disheveled appearance, the expensive watch barely visible beneath his wet sleeve, the controlled violence that seemed to radiate from him even in stillness. "Thank you," she said softly. He nodded once, then turned toward the door. "Wait," Ayla called out. "You're soaked. Let me get you some coffee on the house." The stranger paused, his hand on the door handle. When he turned back, his expression was unreadable. "You don't owe me anything." "I know, but it's raining and you helped me. The least I can do is offer you something warm." For a long moment, he just stared at her, as if trying to solve a puzzle. Finally, he walked to the counter and sat on one of the worn stools. Ayla poured him a cup of coffee, noting how his hands, elegant despite their obvious strength, wrapped around the mug like he was trying to absorb its warmth. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, maybe early 30s, with sharp cheekbones and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from stone. "I'm Ayla," she offered. "Ji-woon," he replied after a moment's hesitation. "That's a beautiful name. Korean." He nodded, surprised by her easy acceptance. Most people struggled with his name or made assumptions about his background. "I had a Korean friend in high school," Ayla continued, refilling his cup. "She taught me that names have meanings. What does yours mean?" Ji-woon's fingers tightened around the mug. "Wisdom and kindness." Ayla smiled. "Your parents had high hopes for you." Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or regret. "They did." The diner was nearly empty now, just an elderly man reading a newspaper in the corner booth and a trucker finishing his pie. Isla should have been cleaning, preparing to close, but something about this stranger made her want to linger. "You're not from around here," she observed. "What makes you say that?" "The way you carry yourself. Like you're used to people moving out of your way." She tilted her head, studying him. "But you're running from something." Jawoon's eyes sharpened. "What makes you think that?" "The way you keep watching the door. The fact that you're sitting in a dive diner at midnight soaking wet, with no umbrella or jacket." Isla's voice was gentle, not accusatory. "Whatever it is, I hope you find what you're looking for." Before he could respond, Sandra's voice cut through the moment. "Isla, we're closing in 10 minutes. Start the chairs." Jawoon stood, pulling a 20 from his wallet and placing it on the counter. "Keep the change. That's too much for the coffee and the conversation." He paused at the door. "Be careful walking home. Not everyone who offers help has good intentions." And then he was gone, disappearing into the rain like he'd never been there at all. Ayla stared at the $20 bill, then at the door where he'd vanished. Something told her this wouldn't be the last time she saw Jawoon, though she couldn't have imagined how dramatically their paths would intertwine. Outside, Jawoon sat in his black sedan, watching through the diner's rain-streaked windows as Ayla finished her closing duties. His phone buzzed insistently. His men, no doubt, wondering where their boss had disappeared to after the ambush. But he couldn't bring himself to leave, not yet. There was something about the way she'd looked at him, not with fear or calculation, but with genuine warmth. When was the last time someone had offered him kindness without expecting something in return? His phone buzzed again. This time he answered. "Boss, where are you? We've been looking everywhere." "I'm fine, Min-seok. Handle the cleanup. I'll be back soon." "But sir, the Cho family." "Can wait." Jawoon's voice was final. "I said I'll be back soon." He ended the call and continued watching as Ayla gathered her purse and jacket, said goodbye to Sandra, and stepped out into the rain. She didn't have an umbrella, just pulled her thin jacket over her head and hurried toward the bus stop. Something twisted in Jiwoon's chest as he watched her small figure disappear into the storm. She was walking home alone, in the rain, after working a double shift at a job that barely paid enough to survive, and she'd still offered him coffee, still smiled at strangers who didn't deserve her kindness. He started his engine and drove slowly behind the bus, telling himself he was just making sure she got home safely. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. Ayla Bennett had done something no one had managed in 15 years of violence and betrayal. She'd made him remember what it felt like to be human. 3 days passed before Ayla saw Jawoon again, but when she did, the circumstances were far different from their quiet diner conversation. She was walking home from her morning shift, exhausted from covering for a sick co-worker, when she heard shouting from the alley behind her apartment building. Against her better judgment, she crept closer to investigate. 2 men in expensive suits had cornered Mr. Kim, the elderly Korean man who ran the corner market. One held a baseball bat, while the other rifled through the old man's wallet. "Please," Mr. Kim was saying in broken English. "I already pay. Every month I pay." "Prices went up, old man," the one with the bat sneered. "Boss says you're behind." Ayla's heart pounded. She should call the police, but her phone was dead, and by the time they arrived, she looked around desperately for something, anything to help. That's when she saw him. Jawoon emerged from the shadows like something out of a nightmare, moving with fluid grace despite his casual jeans and black t-shirt. The transformation from the vulnerable stranger in the diner was complete. This was a man who commanded fear and respect. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying easily across the alley, "I believe you're in the wrong neighborhood." The 2 thugs spun around and Ayla watched their faces drain of color. "Mr. Kang," the one with the bat stammered, "we didn't know. We were just collecting for—" "For whom?" Jawoon's voice was silk over steel. The Yamamoto family. They said this was their territory now." Jawoon stepped closer, and even from her hiding spot, Ayla could feel the temperature in the alley drop. "Did they? How interesting. And did they mention that Mr. Kim is under my protection?" The silence stretched taut as a wire. Finally, the second thug found his voice. "No, sir. We weren't told. We'll leave immediately." "You'll do more than leave." Jawoon's tone was conversational, which somehow made it more terrifying. "You'll return Mr. Kim's money, all of it. Then you'll go back to your bosses and explain that this territory belongs to me. Anyone who has a problem with that arrangement is welcome to discuss it with me personally. The men practically threw the wallet back at Mr. Kim and fled, stumbling over each other in their haste to escape. Ayla pressed herself against the brick wall, heart hammering. This was the same man who'd sat quietly in her diner, drinking coffee and talking about the meaning of his name. But now she was seeing who he really was, someone powerful enough to send grown men running with just a few words. "Are you hurt?" she heard Jiwoon ask Mr. Kim, his voice gentle now. No hurt. "Thank you, Mr. Kang. You are very kind, man. Go home to your family, and Mr. Kim, if anyone bothers you again, call this number." Ayla heard the rustle of paper. "Day or night?" She waited until she heard footsteps retreating before peering around the corner. Mr. Kim was gone, but Jiwoon remained, leaning against the alley wall with his hands in his pockets. He was looking directly at her hiding spot. "You can come out now," he said calmly. Heat flooded Ayla's cheeks as she stepped into view. "I wasn't spying. I heard shouting and I was worried about Mr. Kim." "Were you going to help him?" There was no mockery in his voice, just curiosity. I don't know. I wanted to, but I didn't know how." Jiwoon studied her for a long moment. Most people would have kept walking. "Mr. Kim gives me free tea when I can't afford groceries. He's a good man." "Yes, he is." Jiwoon pushed off from the wall. "What are you doing in this neighborhood? The diner is across town." "I live here." Ayla gestured toward the apartment building. "Third floor, apartment 3B. Something shifted in Jiwoon's expression. "This isn't a safe area for someone like you. Someone like me. Someone who helps strangers and worries about elderly shopkeepers." His voice was soft, almost sad. "Someone good." Ayla felt heat rise in her cheeks again, but for a different reason. "You don't know me well enough to say that." "Don't I?" He stepped closer and she caught a hint of his cologne, something expensive and clean that made her pulse quicken. "You paid a stranger's bus fare in the rain. You offered coffee to someone who looked dangerous. You were ready to help Mr. Kim against 2 armed men, even though you had no way to protect yourself. That doesn't make me special. That makes me human." Jiwoon's eyes darkened. "In my experience, those are the same thing." They stood there in the alley, the afternoon sun filtering through the fire escapes above, and Ayla felt something shift between them. The air seemed charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. "Who are you really?" she asked quietly. "Someone you shouldn't get involved with." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you." He pulled out his phone as it buzzed. "I have to go." But Ayla, she looked up at him, struck again by how handsome he was when he wasn't trying to hide it. "Be careful. What happened today? There are people who might see your kindness as weakness. Don't let them." Before she could respond, a black sedan pulled up to the mouth of the alley. Jiwoon walked toward it, then paused and turned back. "The diner. Do you work there again tonight?" "Tomorrow night. 7 to close." He nodded once, then got into the car and disappeared, leaving Ayla standing alone in the alley with more questions than answers. That evening, as she heated up a can of soup in her tiny kitchen, Ayla couldn't stop thinking about the transformation she'd witnessed. The gentleman who talked about wisdom and kindness had become someone who could terrify grown men with a look. But which version was real? Maybe both, she thought, remembering the way his voice had softened when he spoke to Mr. Kim, the genuine concern in his eyes when he'd warned her to be careful. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The number was unknown. "Hello? Ms. Bennett, this is Dr. Martinez from Cedars-Sinai. I'm calling about your medical bills." Ayla's stomach dropped. She'd been putting off the payments from her emergency room visit last month, when she'd fainted at work from exhaustion and dehydration. "I know I'm behind," she said quickly, "but I can make a payment next week. Actually, I'm calling to inform you that your account has been paid in full." An anonymous benefactor covered the entire balance. Ayla nearly dropped the phone. That's impossible. The bill was over $3,000. I have the payment confirmation right here. Paid in full as of this afternoon. After the doctor hung up, Ayla sat in her tiny kitchen staring at her phone. $3,000. Who would pay that kind of money for a stranger? But even as she asked the question, she already knew the answer. Outside her building, Jiwoon sat in his sedan, watching her silhouetted figure in the third-floor window. Min Seok, his second-in-command, shifted uncomfortably in the driver's seat. Boss, with respect, this isn't like you. Getting involved with civilians, paying their debts. The men are starting to talk. Let them talk, Ji-woon said quietly, his eyes never leaving Ayla's window. But sir, she's just a waitress. What could she possibly offer someone in your position? Ji-woon was quiet for so long that Min-seok thought he wouldn't answer. Finally he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Hope. The next evening at the diner, Ayla couldn't concentrate. Every time the bell above the door chimed, her heart jumped, expecting to see Ji-woon's familiar silhouette. But as the hours crawled by, he didn't appear. She was refilling the coffee station when Sandra approached, her expression unusually serious. Ayla, honey, you've got a visitor. Says he's a friend of yours. Ayla looked up to see a well-dressed Asian man in his 40s standing near the entrance. He was shorter than Ji-woon, but carried himself with similar authority, his expensive suit immaculate despite the late hour. I don't know him, Ayla said quietly. Sandra frowned. He specifically asked for you by name, said it was important. Against her better judgment, Ayla approached the man. Up close, she could see the calculation in his eyes, the way he assessed her like she was a piece of merchandise. Ms. Bennett, he said with a slight bow, my name is Min-seok Park. I work with Ji-woon Kang. Ayla's pulse quickened. Is he okay? He's fine. But I need to speak with you about your association with him. I don't know what you mean. Min-seok's smile was cold. Please, may we sit? Reluctantly, Ayla led him to a corner booth, acutely aware that Sandra and the other customers were watching. She slid into the seat across from him, keeping her hands visible on the table. You seem like a nice girl, Min-seok began, his tone conversational. Good family, honest work, clean record, but you're playing in waters that are far deeper than you understand. I'm not playing at anything, aren't you? His eyes hardened. Ji-woon Kang is not the kind of man who befriends waitresses. He doesn't pay strangers medical bills out of kindness. When someone in his position shows interest in a civilian, it's because he wants something. Ayla felt heat flood her cheeks. You're wrong. Am I? Tell me, Ms. Bennett, what do you really know about him? The question hung in the air like smoke. Ayla realized with growing unease that she knew almost nothing about Ji-woon beyond his name, and the fact that he could terrify grown men with a look. I thought so, Min-seok continued. Let me fill in some blanks. Ji-woon Kang runs one of the most powerful Korean crime families on the West Coast. He controls territory from San Francisco to San Diego, and his business interests include everything from legitimate real estate to less. Legal enterprises. Ayla's mouth went dry. You're lying. 3 years ago, he eliminated an entire rival family in a single night. Last year, he orchestrated the largest money laundering operation in California history. The FBI has been trying to build a case against him for over a decade. Stop. Ayla's voice was barely a whisper. He's killed people, Ms. Bennett, with his own hands. The man you think showed you kindness has blood on his fingers that will never wash clean. Ayla stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I don't believe you. You don't have to believe me. But ask yourself this. Why would a man like that pay attention to someone like you unless he needed something? What could you possibly have that Ji-woon Kang wants? Before Ayla could respond, the diner's bell chimed again. This time, it was Ji-woon who walked through the door, and the change in atmosphere was immediate. Conversations died, customers suddenly found their food very interesting, and even Sandra retreated behind the counter. Ji-woon's eyes found Min-seok first, and his expression went deadly cold. I told you to wait in the car. Min-seok stood, bowing slightly. I thought it was important that Miss Bennett understand the situation. The situation is that you disobeyed a direct order. Ji-woon's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. Leave, now. Min-seok hesitated for a moment, then nodded and headed for the door. As he passed Ayla, he leaned close enough to whisper, Ask him about the Nakamura family. Ask him what happened to their daughter. Then he was gone, leaving Ayla alone with Ji-woon and the weight of everything she'd just learned. Ji-woon approached slowly, his hands visible, like he was approaching a wounded animal. What did he tell you? Is it true? Ayla's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. Are you really a criminal? A killer? A monster? Ji-woon's smile was bitter. Yes, to all of the above. The simple honesty of his answer hit her like a physical blow. She'd been hoping for denials, explanations, anything but this calm confirmation of her worst fears. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have let me buy you coffee if you'd known? I don't know. That's why I didn't tell you. He slid into the booth across from where she'd been sitting, and after a moment's hesitation, she joined him. I wanted to be just Ji-woon for a while, not the boss, not the killer, just a man drinking coffee with a beautiful woman who was kind to him. The medical bills. That was you. Yes. Why? Ji-woon was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. Because you helped me when you had no reason to. Because you offered me kindness when I didn't deserve it. Because in my world, people like you don't exist. People like me? Good people. People who help strangers and worry about elderly shopkeepers and work double shifts without complaining. He looked up, and she was startled by the vulnerability in his eyes. People who make me remember that I used to be human. Ayla felt tears prick her eyes. What happened to you? Life, choices, circumstances. He shrugged. Does it matter? This is who I am now. But it doesn't have to be who you stay. Ji-woon's laugh was harsh. You think I can just walk away? That I can decide to be someone else? I think people can change if they want to badly enough. And what if I don't want to? What if I like the power, the fear, the control? Ayla studied his face, seeing past the hard mask to the pain underneath. Then you wouldn't have paid my medical bills. You wouldn't have protected Mr. Kim. You wouldn't be sitting here trying to convince me that you're a monster, when everything you've done for me says otherwise. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The diner hummed with quiet conversation and the clink of dishes, but their corner booth felt like an island separate from the rest of the world. You should stay away from me, Ji-woon said finally. Probably. I'm dangerous. Being around me puts you at risk. I know. Then why are you still sitting here? Ayla reached across the table and placed her hand over his. His skin was warm, his fingers long and elegant, despite the calluses she could feel. Because I don't think you're the monster you pretend to be, and I think you need someone to believe that about you. Ji-woon stared down at their joined hands, like he'd never seen anything so miraculous. When he looked up, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. You're going to get hurt. Maybe, but that's my choice to make. He turned his hand over, threading their fingers together. I can't promise you a normal life. I never asked for normal. I can't promise you safety. I never asked for that either. Then what do you want? Ayla smiled, and for the first time since Min-seok's revelations, she felt certain of her answer. I want to know who you really are. Not the boss, not the killer, just Ji-woon. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. That might be the most dangerous thing of all. Outside the diner, in a car parked across the street, Detective Raul Velasquez lowered his camera and reached for his radio. He'd been tracking Ji-woon Kang for months, waiting for the crime boss to make a mistake. It looked like he finally had. 2 weeks later, Ayla's life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined. Ji-woon had kept his promise to show her who he really was, taking her to art galleries and quiet restaurants, walking with her through Griffith Park, as he told her stories about his childhood in Seoul and his family's immigration to Los Angeles when he was 12. She learned that he spoke 4 languages fluently, that he had a degree in international business from USC, and that he'd originally planned to be a legitimate entrepreneur before circumstances pulled him into his father's world. She discovered his love for classical music and old movies, his surprising knowledge of literature, and the way his entire face changed when he smiled genuinely. But she also saw glimpses of the other Ji-woon, the one who could silence a room with a look, who carried himself like violence was always an option, who received phone calls that made his expression go cold and distant. Tonight was one of those nights. They were having dinner at a small Korean restaurant in Koreatown when his phone buzzed. Ji-woon glanced at the screen and his jaw tightened. I have to take this, he said, standing and walking toward the restaurant's entrance. Ayla watched through the window as he paced, his free hand gesturing sharply as he spoke in rapid Korean. Even without understanding the words, she could tell he was angry. When he returned to the table, his entire demeanor had changed. We need to leave, he said, already reaching for his wallet. What's wrong? Business? I'll have Min Seok drive you home. Ji-woon? Please. His voice was sharp, then softened. I'm sorry, this can't wait. They rode in silence to her apartment building, the tension in the car thick enough to cut. When they pulled up to the curb, Ji-woon walked her to the door despite her protests that it wasn't necessary. Will I see you tomorrow? She asked. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. I hope so. The uncertainty in his voice made her stomach clench. What's happening? Nothing you need to worry about. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. Go inside. Lock your door. Ayla watched from her window as the black sedan disappeared into the night, a cold dread settling in her chest. She didn't see Ji-woon for 3 days. On the 4th day, Detective Velasquez showed up at the diner. He was a tall, lean man with graying hair and tired eyes, the kind of cop who'd seen too much and believed in too little. He ordered coffee and pie, made small talk with Sandra, and waited until Ayla's shift was nearly over before approaching her. Ms. Bennett, I'm Detective Velasquez, LAPD. I was hoping we could talk. Ayla's blood turned to ice. About what? About your relationship with Ji-woon Kang. She glanced around the diner, noting that most of the other customers had left. Sandra was in the back office, counting the till. They were essentially alone. I don't know what you mean. Velasquez smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Ms. Bennett, I've been watching Mr. Kang for a very long time. I know he's been spending time with you. I know he paid your medical bills. I know he's been protecting you. I don't have to talk to you without a lawyer. No, you don't. But I think you'll want to hear what I have to say. He pulled out a manila folder and set it on the counter. Do you know what happened to the Nakamura family 3 years ago? Despite herself, Ayla remembered Min Seok's parting words. Ask him about the Nakamura family. Ask him what happened to their daughter. No, she said quietly. Velasquez opened the folder, revealing crime scene photos that made Ayla's stomach lurch. Hiroshi Nakamura was trying to move into Kang's territory, so Kang decided to send a message. He killed Hiroshi, his wife, and his 2 sons, but the daughter. He pulled out another photo. Yuki Nakamura was 23, a nursing student. She had nothing to do with her father's business. Ayla stared at the photo of a young woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. She looked like she could have been Ayla's friend, someone who helped strangers and worried about elderly shopkeepers. Kang tortured her for 3 days before he killed her, Velasquez continued. Used her to get information about her father's operations. When he was done with her, he dumped her body in the harbor. Stop. Ayla's voice was barely a whisper. The man you think you know, the one who buys you dinner and walks you home, he's a monster. And you're not special to him, Miss Bennett. You're just another tool he's planning to use. You're lying. Am I? Then why hasn't he told you about Yuki? Why hasn't he mentioned that the FBI is closing in on him? Why hasn't he warned you that being seen with him makes you a target for every rival family in the city? Ayla felt the room spinning around her. What do you want from me? Help us bring him down. Wear a wire, get him to talk about his operations. In exchange, we'll put you in witness protection. Give you a new life somewhere safe. And if I refuse, Velasquez's expression hardened, then you'll end up like Yuki Nakamura, because that's what happens to people who get too close to Ji-woon Kang. He left the folder on the counter and walked out, leaving Ayla staring at the photos of a dead girl who'd trusted the wrong man. That night, Ayla sat in her apartment, staring at her phone. She'd tried calling Ji-woon 6 times, but it went straight to voicemail. The photos from Velasquez's folder were spread across her coffee table, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't stop looking at Yuki Nakamura's face. Had Ji-woon really done those things? Had he tortured an innocent girl, someone not so different from Ayla herself? She thought about the gentleness in his touch, the vulnerability in his eyes when he talked about his past, the way he'd protected Mr. Kim without expecting anything in return. But she also remembered the fear in those thugs' faces, the cold authority in his voice, the way people scattered when he entered a room. Which version was real? Her phone rang and her heart jumped, but it wasn't Ji-woon. It was an unknown number. Hello? Ms. Bennett, this is Dr. Kim from UCLA Medical Center. I'm calling about your sister. Ayla's blood went cold. My sister? What about her? She was brought in an hour ago, car accident. She's in surgery now, but her condition is critical. The phone slipped from Ayla's nerveless fingers. Laurie was only 19, a sophomore at UCLA studying to be a teacher. She was supposed to be safe in her dorm, studying for midterms. Ayla grabbed her jacket and ran for the door, not bothering to lock it behind her. She had to get to the hospital, had to make sure Laurie was okay. She was halfway down the stairs when she realized she didn't have a car, couldn't afford a taxi, and the buses had stopped running for the night. That's when she saw the black sedan parked across the street. Min-seok got out of the driver's seat as she approached, his expression unreadable. "Miss Bennett, I heard about your sister. Mr. Kang sent me to drive you to the hospital." Ayla hesitated. After everything Velasquez had told her, getting into a car with one of Ji-woon's men seemed like the height of stupidity, but Laurie was hurt, possibly dying, and she had no other way to get there. "Thank you," she said, climbing into the back seat. As they drove through the empty streets, Ayla stared out the window and tried not to think about crime scene photos or dead girls, or the man she'd fallen in love with who might be a monster. All she could think about was Laurie, lying on an operating table fighting for her life, and the terrible certainty that somehow this was all connected to Ji-woon Kang. The hospital waiting room smelled like disinfectant and despair. Ayla sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair, still wearing her diner uniform, watching the clock on the wall tick past midnight. Laurie had been in surgery for 3 hours, and no one could tell her anything beyond critical condition, and we're doing everything we can. Min-seok had disappeared after dropping her off. But she wasn't alone. Other families clustered in small groups, whispering prayers and holding each other, the universal language of fear and hope. She was dozing fitfully when a familiar voice spoke her name. Ayla. She looked up to find Ji-woon standing beside her chair, still wearing a black suit, but with his tie loosened and his hair disheveled. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Min-seok told me what happened. I came as soon as I could." He sat beside her, and despite everything, the photos, the detective's warnings, her own doubts, she felt a wave of relief at his presence. "Any word?" he asked gently. "She's still in surgery. They won't tell me anything else." Ayla's voice cracked. "She's only 19, Ji-woon. She's supposed to be studying for her psychology midterm, not—" He reached for her hand, then stopped, uncertainty flickering across his face. "May I?" She nodded, and he took her hand in both of his warmth anchoring her to the moment. "Tell me about her," he said. "Laurie's. She's everything good about our family. Smart, funny, determined. She wants to be a child psychologist, help kids who've been through trauma." Ayla wiped her eyes with her free hand. "Our parents died when she was 12. Car accident, just like this. I've been taking care of her ever since, making sure she had everything she needed for college. That's why you work double shifts. Her tuition, her dorm, her books, it all costs so much. But she's worth it. She's going to change the world." Ayla's voice broke completely. "She has to be okay. She has to." Ji-woon squeezed her hand. "She will be." "How can you know that?" "Because she's your sister, and you don't give up on the people you love." They sat in silence for a while, watching the controlled chaos of the hospital around them. Finally, Ayla spoke again. "A detective came to see me today. Velasquez." Ji-woon went very still. "What did he want?" "He showed me pictures, crime scene photos." She turned to look at him, studying his profile. "He told me about the Nakamura family." Ji-woon closed his eyes, his jaw clenching. "What did he tell you?" "That you killed them, all of them, including a girl named Yuki who was just a nursing student. And you believed him?" "I don't know what to believe anymore." Ayla pulled her hand free. "Did you do it? Did you kill that girl?" For a long moment, Ji-woon didn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes." The word hit her like a physical blow. Even though she'd been expecting it, hearing him confirm it made her stomach lurch. "But not the way he told you," Ji-woon continued. "Hiroshi Nakamura wasn't trying to move into my territory. He was trafficking children, Ayla. Girls as young as 12, brought over from Southeast Asia and forced into prostitution. When I found out, I gave him a chance to stop. He refused." Ayla stared at him. "So you killed his family?" "I killed him and his lieutenants, but Yuki—" Ji-woon's voice broke. She was there when we raided the warehouse. She'd been trying to help the girls, bringing them food and medical supplies. She was shot in the crossfire. Velasquez said you tortured her. I held her while she died. She was terrified, asking for her mother in Japanese. I stayed with her until the end because no one should die alone. Tears tracked down his cheeks. I've done terrible things. Ayla, I've killed people, hurt people, made choices that haunt me every night, but I didn't torture an innocent girl. I couldn't save her, but I didn't hurt her. Ayla felt something crack open in her chest. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because the truth doesn't matter. Yuki Nakamura is still dead. Those children are still traumatized. I'm still a killer. He wiped his eyes roughly. Velasquez isn't wrong about what I am. He's just wrong about why. What do you mean? Jiwoon took a shaky breath. My father built his organization on protection, keeping our community safe from gangs, corrupt cops, predators. When he died, I inherited that responsibility. But somewhere along the way, I became the thing we were supposed to protect people from. So change. Walk away. It's not that simple. There are contracts, obligations, people who depend on me. And there are monsters out there who would fill the vacuum if I disappeared. At least this way, I can control the damage. Before Ayla could respond, a doctor in surgical scrubs approached them. Ms. Bennett, I'm Dr. Rodriguez. Your sister is out of surgery. Ayla shot to her feet. Is she okay? She's stable. The surgery went well, but she has a long recovery ahead of her. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, traumatic brain injury. She's going to need extensive rehabilitation. But she'll live. Yes, she'll live. Ayla collapsed back into her chair, overwhelmed with relief. Jiwoon's hand found hers again, steady and warm. Can I see her? She asked. She's in the ICU, family only, and only for a few minutes. As Dr. Rodriguez led her toward the elevator, Ayla turned back to Jiwoon. Will you wait for me? As long as you need. Laurie looked so small in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines and tubes. Her face was swollen and bruised, but she was breathing on her own. Ayla sat beside her and took her sister's hand. Hey, baby girl, she whispered. You scared me. But you're going to be okay. You're going to get better, and you're going to finish school, and you're going to help all those kids you're always talking about. Laurie's eyes fluttered open, unfocused but aware. Ayla, her voice was barely audible. I'm here, I'm right here. The car, it came out of nowhere. I tried to stop, but... Shh, don't worry about that now. Just rest. I love you, Laurie whispered. I love you too, so much. When Ayla returned to the waiting room, Jiwoon was on his phone, speaking in low, urgent Korean. He ended the call when he saw her. How is she? Awake, talking. She's going to be okay. Ayla sat beside him. The bills are going to be enormous. Her insurance won't cover everything, and the rehabilitation. I'll take care of it. Jiwoon, no, I can't let you. Yes, you can. His voice was firm. Let me do this for you, for her. Why? After everything we just talked about, why would you? Because I love you. The words hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. You love me, she repeated. I know I have no right to. I know I'm not the kind of man you should be with. But yes, I love you. I love your kindness, your strength, the way you see good in people even when they can't see it in themselves. He cupped her face in his hands. You saved my life that night on the bus, Ayla. Not just from the rain, but from becoming completely lost. I love you too, she whispered. God help me, but I do. Then help me become the man you see when you look at me. Help me find a way out of this life. How? I don't know yet, but I know I can't keep living this way. Not if I want to deserve you. Ayla leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. It won't be easy. Nothing worth having ever is. There will be consequences, people who won't want to let you go. I know. You could die. I'm already dead, Ayla. Have been for years. You're the only thing that makes me feel alive. She opened her eyes and looked at him, really looked, past the expensive suit and the dangerous reputation, past the blood on his hands and the weight of his choices. She saw the boy who'd immigrated to a new country, the son who'd inherited an impossible legacy, the man who'd held a dying girl and stayed with her until the end. Okay, she said. Okay, let's find a way out. Together. Jiwoon pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. Around them, the hospital hummed with life and death and hope, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe in the possibility of redemption. Outside in the parking garage, Detective Velasquez lowered his binoculars and reached for his radio. He'd been watching Jiwoon Kang for months, waiting for the crime boss to make a mistake. But as he watched the man hold the waitress like she was his salvation, Velasquez realized that maybe Kang hadn't made a mistake at all. Maybe he'd found something worth changing for. Years had passed since that night in the hospital waiting room, and the transformation had been neither quick nor easy. Jiwoon's exit from the criminal world had required careful negotiation, strategic alliances, and more than a few dangerous confrontations. But with Ayla's unwavering support and his own determination to become worthy of her love, he'd managed to build something new from the ashes of his old life. The legitimate security company he now ran employed many of his former associates, channeling their skills toward protecting the vulnerable rather than exploiting them. The community center they'd opened in Koreatown provided resources for immigrants and at-risk youth, funded by the fortune he'd accumulated during his darker years. Laurie had recovered completely from her accident, graduating summa cum laude with her psychology degree and now working as a child therapist at the center. She'd never fully trusted Jiwoon in the beginning, but time and his obvious devotion to her sister had won her over. "You know," she said one evening as they watched Ayla teach a cooking class to a group of teenage girls, "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad she met you." Jiwoon looked down at the young woman who'd become like a sister to him. "Even knowing what I used to be? Especially knowing what you used to be, it makes what you've become that much more meaningful." On the small stage at the front of the room, Ayla was laughing at something one of the girls had said, her face bright with joy. She wore a simple sundress and had flower in her hair, and Jiwoon thought she'd never looked more beautiful. "You saved my life," he said quietly, the words he'd spoken to her that first night echoing in his memory. "No," Laurie corrected, following his gaze. "You saved each other." As if sensing his attention, Ayla looked over and smiled, the same warm, genuine smile that had first captured his heart on a rainy night when she'd paid a stranger's bus fare without expecting anything in return. He smiled back, thinking of the ring hidden in his jacket pocket, the question he'd been planning.